You are now watching Zach Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin' peeps? Welcome back to the channel, Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be going over the decks that didn't quite make the top 10 lists, that are going to be the decks between 20th place all the way up to 11th place, so you're going to get a larger grasp of what's going on in the metagame. So if you got a chance to check out already, check out my top 10 best decks video. If not, by all means, this is a great place to start, so it's going to be awesome. I'm excited to share these awesome deck lists. Maybe we'll see some decks that don't always make the top 10 list on here. So that being said, give this video a thumbs up, like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's jump into our number 20 spots. Hopping into our number 20 spot and falling from number 15 last week, we got VICTINI VMAX. So the brainchild of LEAFEON. This deck really seems to be good and just not really played, if that makes sense. Maybe it's because we're not really seeing too many Zacian decks seeing success, but at the same time, this past week, we have seen Zacian spike up, we have seen Dragapult spike up. This deck does well against both of them. It actually can hold its own against some other decks like Jolteon. Sure, there's decks like Rapid Strike, Urshifu Melanie, and maybe even Mew, and other decks that really can beat this deck, but at the same time, I think that VICTINI VMAX is a valid choice, a little bit cheaper than most other decks, and it seems like it can do some numbers. It's pretty good, like, right? That's kind of where I'm at. I think it can do some numbers. So that being said, it's worthwhile to check out. Most of the decks on this list are decks that I wouldn't personally recommend unless it's either you're balling on a budget or you think the deck's going to spike up a little bit. These are decks that received 1 or 2 placements, or as we get closer to 11, maybe they're breaking into the top 10. But a lot of these lists in general just can't hold up to the top 10, or they only beat a handful of decks. Usually there's some flaws. This deck is relatively fragile because it only plays 4 basic Pokemon, for example. So keep that in mind. So yeah, I think VICTINI VMAX is a cool deck. It might be a little bit better placed. The fact that it went all the way down to number 20 is surprising. I think this deck might spike up closer to the top of this list, so the 11-12 spot, and it might even break within the top 10. Hopping into our number 19 spot and falling from number 17 last week is Rayquaza VMAX. Now, this is the type of deck that Yakamaru seems to be the only one seeing success with, so they're the only player. They're making a top 4 a week or something like that at some relatively medium-sized events. So Ray's getting a placement here and there. It's just not the most consistent deck. I know that I took this deck to a tournament and it didn't necessarily do the hottest. Now, that being said, I think Ray is the type of deck that you want to be on the lookout for, because it could kind of creep into the metagame, and its attack does do well against a lot of the VMAX decks. It's just finding some of those ideal cards to add in, and maybe Ultra Ball is really what we're looking for when it comes to a deck like this. That being said, I think that Ray is, it's a fun deck. I recommend picking up the cards now. You can even use code ZLesage5 to get a 5% discount at PTCGO That's in the description. And if you want to know any more about these decks within the top 20 or top 10 decks, the pinned comment does have all the deck lists and reference videos for most of these decks. If there's not a reference video for some of these decks, because sometimes they're new entrants into the metagame, or someone plays a one-of deck and sees success, those are the types of decks that I will likely get to a video as well. So stay tuned for all that great stuff. But right now, I think Ray's, it's okay. It could move up a little bit, but really it seems like it's only one player playing it, and it's similar to Josh Sutherland playing Zacian, except that player is not seeing as much success as Josh. So not to name names or anything, but gotta give success where it is. Yakamaru is seeing success. Other players who are playing, pretty much the only ones playing another deck, such as Josh and Turbo Zacian, are seeing much more success. So you gotta think, is Ray the issue? Is the player the issue? I think at the end of the day, Ray might be the limiting factor here. Hopping into our number 18 spot, and not even on anywhere within our top 20 last week, is Dragapult VMAX. So a lot of peeps love Dragapult VMAX, and you're like, where's it been? Where's it been? It's here. It's back. Thanks to LEAFEON, who again builds these decks that are Kabu, Crushing Hammer, fan of waves-based decks. So really, you're just going to be going all out on the Max Phantom build, and Path to the Peak, and Disruption, and all the sneaky stuff that Dragapult's always had, except you're cutting the INTELEON line for more interesting cards to play into the deck. This deck has seen a little bit of traction in the past week, so it is the type of deck that I think could spike up a little bit more if players just decide to play it. The biggest factor why decks are so low on this list is lack of play, not lack of usability. With this version seems like it's better positioned against a lot of the metagame with Rapid Strike Urshifu on the rise, so I do think a deck like this does have a place, and if anything, I do think this deck can grow a little bit. So keep it in mind, give it a whirl, and if you're a Dragapult fan, you might just like this deck. Like I said, it seems pretty decently positioned against the metagame, so if you are looking for a unique deck, this is one that I think might actually spike up. Hopping into number 17 and falling from number 16 last week is INTELEON VMAX. As the metagame progresses, I think that this is the type of deck that just falls down because it cannot hit consistently large numbers. That might be one of the biggest common factors with these decks that are between 11 to 20, is that they're not necessarily hitting for one-shots, whereas you've got to think of other decks like Single Strike Urshifu and Mew VMAX, or all of the other ones who are top of the top 10 list. Those ones are aimed to get one shots and hit over certain numbers. This deck really has a lot of stamina, and it has Cheryl as healing and can hold its own. Very cool deck. I think this is the type of deck that could do well at a regionals or sneak into regionals. Online best of one seems a little bit too loose for a deck like this. So if you are preparing for a best of 3 event, this deck might be better positioned because you can hold on and win a long game 1. This deck is prone to ties in best of 1 because the format is so much shorter and quicker and stuff like that. I think that at the same time, we got to look into I don't know, INTELEON VMAX seems good. It's not bad. The fact that it's this low seems a little bit off, but again, with decks like Jolteon and Mew being able to one-shot this or having a type advantage against it, there's a reason why. This has 4 times as much as Victini, so you could put that into perspective. Even though that it's really not too many placements above it, it is still seeing more success. This is the type of deck that I think could have like 1 or 2 good placements and really pop off and maybe even make it back into our top 10 list. Hopping into number 16 and falling from number 10 is VMAX. So Eternatus is really one of those decks that has been trying to beat Mew, and I mean, if a deck's trying to beat Mew and it does a good job at beating Mew, which this deck has done a pretty good job at beating Mew, it does see success. As Mew's become more stronger and has added Meloetta can knock out any of these Pokemon pretty much on the first turn and take a quick 2 prize card, setting this deck back forever. Like, it's one of those things where sometimes a Meloetta knockout literally just wins the game because you are so far behind your opponent that it's statistically improbable for you to win that game. So as players have kind of moved on to other decks such as Gengar and Rapid Strike Urshifu Moltres and Single Strike Urshifu and even the newcomer Duraludon VMAX to beat Mew and other decks in the format, decks like Etern are going to kind of fall back. That's not to say that Etern's not bad, or that it's good or that it's bad or anything. I think it's just an okay deck until we get cards in the future like Ultra Ball. So keep that in mind. Again, all of these lists are in the pinned comments, so you can kind of copy and paste them, play around with them. But decks within the 11 to 20 categories are there for a reason. You got to ask yourself, if you're not playing Mew because you can't afford Mew, that's cool. But why are you not playing Jolteon or Single Strike Urshifu or Rapid Strike Urshifu Moltres? If your player is looking for something unique, or if you're a player who's looking to kind of grow with the game and experiment with different decks, by all means, this list is for you. But these are the decks that are seeing some success, but not as much success as Mew or anything. To put it into perspective, we have Mew has more than 30 times the amount of success that Etern VMAX has. That's a crazy number. So I just try to like put people back to reality. This list is cool. This deck is awesome. I think you'll have a lot of fun with this deck. But if you are looking for competitive decks and the utmost competitive decks, you got to ask yourself, why are you not playing Mew? Why are you not playing Jolteon? Stuff like that. If your answer is like, yo, I want to experiment, have fun, by all means, this list is for you. If not, it's really just to show you where everything is positioned in the current metagame. Hopping into number 15 and not anywhere on this list before is Gardevoir VMAX. So I'm not entirely sure of who was really the first one to start this reaction or this deck, but it did win the Yosefi event late last week, or just late the weekend before that, where I wasn't necessarily expecting that. It's kind of a high healing, mid-range disruption deck. And I mean, maybe that's enough to kind of hold on to the metagame. I wasn't expecting it to be so hard or so high, but a couple decent placements spiked it up to number 15 on this list. Whereas I don't necessarily think we're going to see Gardevoir pop off after that. I think Gardevoir's it had its moment in the spotlight. A player broke through with this deck at a medium-sized event, and the deck's hype is probably going to deplete, kind of as we've seen in the past week. So just throwing it out there, Gardevoir VMAX is kind of this mid-range heal, attack, kind of cool deck going on with deck cards like Suspicious Food Tin and Full Face Guard, and there's cards in here that we don't regularly see play all the time, but it is a cool deck. Not sure if I'll get a chance to cover this one on the channel, but if I do, by all means, be sure to check it out. And if I don't, by all means, be sure to check out all the other videos that I've created on the channel. The list is in the pinned comment, so if you want to play around with it yourself, let me know what you think about this deck in the comments. Hopping into our number 14 spot and falling from number 11 last week is LEAFEON VMAX. LEAFEON VMAX is the sad case of a deck that's just not necessarily seeing as much success as we're used to. It's really one of those things where this was a top 5 deck at one point, just because Grass Knot is so efficient. But Mew and Jolteon right now are riding up at the top. They both have 0 retreat cost. So you can see how difficult that is to play when it comes to a deck like this. Now, I have seen a few players experiment with a lighter line of LEAFEON VMAX, which is good at beating the single strike Urshifu decks and stuff like that. And then they're playing a Galarian Moltres to deal with Mew. I think at that point, it's better just to play Rapid Strike Urshifu with Mew or with Moltres, or maybe you're trying to play another deck. I think that if you're trying to artificially create something, there might be another deck that does it better. TLDR, like, don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. LEAFEON VMAX, again, it's really just all about the retreat costs in the format. As retreat costs grow, or as they don't grow, is really going to dictate how this deck's going to see success. Considering Mew and Jolteon are so significant in the format, this deck's of course going to struggle, and other decks within the top 10 as well, such as Gengar and even the Rapid Strike Urshifus can target down these Sobbles and make it difficult to deal with. So keep that in mind when you want to pick out LEAFEON. That being said, LEAFEON is the type of deck that can spike within the top 10. I think this deck's going to stay within the higher amount of the top 20, so the 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 spot, probably not slipping below that, but we'll see how the metagame grows. Hopping into our number 13 spot, and previously not anywhere within our whole top 20 list last week, is BLISSEY V. Now, BLISSEY V is a really cool deck because you're trying to discard some energies and get them back with your attack and accelerate energies and do a lot of damage in the process. Luckily, BLISSEY is one of the only few decks that has a way to block its weakness, and that is with Dunsparce's Mysterious Nest ability. So it does allow you to totally block that weakness away for your colorless Pokemon, which is helpful against decks like Single Strike Urshifu, Rapid Strike Urshifu Moltres, and Rapid Strike Urshifu Melanie. Basically any fighting deck in general. So having cards like Crushing Hammer, Healing, Fan of Waves, Cape of Toughness giving yourself more HP, damage, you could increase your damage with powerful colorless energy. And you have, like, there's so many cool cards that you just have in a deck like this that it does make it successful. Again, I haven't covered this one on the channel before. It's one of the few decks that I haven't. And with it being a newcomer, I'm going to give it a little bit to kind of vibe out. This could have been a 1 week special. I'm not sure if another YouTuber, PokeTuber covered this deck, or maybe it's based off one person's success. But it is the type of deck that I think might have a chance in the metagame. If anything, I'm not sure where it's going to be placed, especially if the deck hasn't had any footing on the list before, but BLISSEY V does seem really cool from an outsider's perspective. So here we are at number 12, and previously at number 8 we have Malamar. So it's weird to see Malamar kind of dipping after Simon Trottier saw success, coming second at the late night series last Monday, but it is one of those things where Malamar really only saw that success. Players tried to replicate it, didn't really see that much success after it, and I think that's really where this deck kind of fell off. So the Chinchino version might just be the better way to play this deck, or maybe Inteleon's better in certain metagames, or maybe it's really good to surprise decks in general. The reason why we see decks like Malamar, or you might have been looking at Play Limitless and see decks like Regidrago with Cherum, or even the Galarian Moltres deck pop up, is because they usually have a handful of good matchups here or there, and a lot of the top decks don't have a way to draw multiple prize cards. So as long as you avoid decks like Jolteon or Rapid Strike Urshifu, you're usually doing pretty good, and you beat the decks that you're designed to beat. So this is, again, one of those decks that I think is really cool. It just might not necessarily be as well positioned as we want to all the time, or players might just not be interested in playing this particular single prize card deck, because players who play single prize card decks typically swap in between single prize card decks. So maybe they experimented with the Galarian Moltres, or even the same players are playing the Regidrago deck, always looking for something new, and they don't necessarily stick to one particular deck. Here we are at number 11, and again, another deck that has not made our top 20 list before is Suicune with Inteleon. Now, this is not Suicune Ludicolo, but it does take kind of the Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX core with Inteleon, with Crushing Hammers, Fan of Waves, Path to the Peak, stuff like that, and really, just very similar to an Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX deck as a basic Pokemon instead of a Stage 1 Pokemon. This deck has basically seen a lot of success due to Tate Whitesell playing it. And I think that Tate played this with Celios not that long ago, maybe a couple weeks back. Picked up a little bit of traction, but didn't necessarily make the top 10. Now that I'm covering the full top 20 list, here's where we have it at number 11, its highest peaking placements, and we'll see exactly where this deck can go. Do I think this deck could break into the top 10? Yeah, it depends on how many people play it, or if they're able to popularize this new archetype, but otherwise, it just basically plays out like a cross between Suicune, Ludicolo, and Ice Rider Calyrex and Inteleon, where very similar decks, very similar cards, but you're swapping the Ludicolo line for Crushing Hammers and Fan of Waves and Path to the Peak, which can be quite effective in this format. So we'll see if this deck, where it ends up. Maybe I'll end up covering this one on the channel, but again, all of these decks are available in the pinned comment below for your reference, and again, most of them do have a reference video. If they don't, there's other similar decks like Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX with hammers that would be a worthwhile watch, or even maybe my Suicune Ludicolo video if you're learning more about those particular Pokemon. And like I said, I try to cover pretty much every deck within the top 20, so if I haven't got a chance to cover it, it's probably on my to-do list. If not, it's probably because I don't necessarily think it's going to stay within the top 20 longer, or I'm just incredibly busy, which is usually the case. So that being said, I think this deck's awesome. Give it a try if you haven't already. It might be the real deal. That's what we got going on with this video today here, peeps. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing all of these decks, and again, I highly urge you to check out the top 10 decks video if you haven't already. That's going to be the continuation on of this video. I do put the top 10 deck video out first because those are the ones that are really important to the metagame, but this really gives you a large picture of what's going on, and maybe you'll find some decks bubbling up in the lower of the top 20 or even anywhere within this list that end up making it into the top 10. So that's really what the goal is with this video, really sharing more of what's going on with the metagame and really providing all that information to kind of make one larger list. So really hope everyone likes it. If you like it, by all means give it a thumbs up. It really does help boost the YouTube algorithm and will help us get to 8,000 subs quicker. So that's the freest way to support the channel. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I know a lot of peeps think that they've subscribed, but I often find myself in the same position where I think I subscribe and I haven't already. So do that if you get a chance. That being said, I'm going to go edit this video, so I'll catch up with all y'all later. Stay tuned for a lot of great Pokemon content this week. Peace out and have a great one. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video, and have yourself a great day. Thanks.